Hey, everybody. Welcome back to 20 Till Profitability. And this is Jay Niblick, and we got Brian Arzani with us. Hey, Brian.
What up, Jay?
Not much. Welcome back from your recharging, sharpening the saw kind of week there. Hope you had a good one.
It was awesome. Great time, great memories. It's all we have in this life, right? You either make them or you wish you had them. So that's what we do, baby.
I say to my kids all the time, making memories. Sometimes that means they're doing something they don't like to do, and I still kind of give them crap about it. Be like, man, you're making memories.
Hey, there's a book out there called Happy Money that talks about that. It's not about making everything perfect. It's about the things that really kind of just suck. And that's the thing when you get back as siblings, you're older in life. That's the stuff you reminisce about, how the car broke down or the AC wasn't right or we didn't have the right lug nut on the family vacation and whatever. The birthday cake was shit, whatever. I mean, that's
ate Christmas dinner. Yeah.
Yep, that's where true happiness comes from. So those of you who are listening, there's your gift for the day. It's not about making everything perfect. Don't got to be a lawnmower parent. Helicopter parents were good. Lawnmower parents are psycho. Let some stuff suck a little bit. It's okay. Hey.
So we got 20 minutes. We give you guys 20 minutes on these calls to make you more profitable, because if you got more than 20 minutes, I can already tell you why you're not making enough money. Action. You got to get out there and do it. Stop short little breaks, learn some cool stuff, and then get back out and go. You don't have to have it perfect. You don't have to have all the answers. Colin Powell did a great presentation, Colonel Colin Powell, about best battlefield commanders operate on 50, 60, maybe 70% situational intelligence. So you got 10 questions. All of these questions are super important. Any one of them could cost the mission. And a lot of people will want to wait as consultants until they've got all 10 questions answered. I'm not going to squeeze the trigger because we never pull the trigger. I'm not going to squeeze the trigger until I get everything answered. It's a pet peeve of mine. I'm always doing that to people online or something. I'm like, don't pull the trigger. But they say it all the time.
You old military guys, I know.
Answered. I got to know how much is this and how much is that and what am I going to do here? 60%. You got 6 of the 10 questions you have in your head, no matter how important the other 4 questions are. Go. You'll figure the shit out. Just make it happen. Yep. So we're talking in this series. This is the second of the profile series, where we're talking about one of the best ways to create profitability is to use some sort of metric, some way to measure or quantify or enumerate the intangibles in the organization that have to do with the humans. Our preferred model for that is using some sort of personality assessment or psychometric tool, as they're properly called. And we talked last week about how the DISC index is one of the ones that we use. Now in our set, we have what, why, and how of human performance. What talents do they have based on how they think and make decisions? Dr. Hartman's work. Why are they motivated to use those? Based on Dr. Spronger's work and Rokeach and a bunch of other guys. We'll be talking about that today. And how do they prefer to use them? So if you didn't see last week's, go down below and you should be registered on this page. Go to Innermetrix.com if you're watching this on YouTube or Facebook or something. Go to Innermetrix.com and register. So we'll email it to you. You don't have to go searching for it. But if you didn't do that already and you haven't registered to be notified of these things that we do every week, all around how to be more profitable, then look at last week's webinar where we talk about how. And that's using that profile to identify traits and characteristics in a person's natural behavioral style and how that relates to the problems they're going to see. Because in the end, we call our consultants business diagnosticians many times. We talk about the diagnostic sales process, and it's all about, here's the problem that they're having at work with this individual or this set of individuals or team. We got to diagnose the problem. We always say, Brian, and back me up, we always talk about think like physicians. Physicians don't just see a patient and go, well, let's start throwing crap at him. Try one of these pills and try one of those. They diagnose the problem before they treat it. And diagnosing the problem means using some sort of diagnostic tool, MRIs, blood work, blood pressure, physical examination. They do things that put numbers down that they can say this is in an acceptable range, above it, or below it. And that helps them accurately decide what's the course of action to fix the problem. And we can't just be the Wild West and go in and go, my gut says after 20 years of being a manager in a sales department, this guy's not selling because of this. Sorry, folks, your nose ain't that good. And businesses aren't going to buy that necessarily anyway. And it's not doing a good service to treat them that way. Diagnose the problem. So go ahead, Brian.
Nope, it's good. I think we got to start the timer here too. Do you go to started it?
I already started it.
Rock and roll. So I think
education on how to make money.
Yeah, rock on. So the big thing too is we always say this. I mean, this is something that Jay, you and I have said for years, is just we take diagnostic tools and we create objectivity around a very subjective environment, human nature. So rock and roll, man. I love it, and that's what we do. And if a consultant is going at a situation or a client, and their only background is training, or their only background is coaching, or background is testing, they only have that lens and they think that lens can fix everything. I think the big thing we do with our consultants is we give them the ability to holistically look in, and like you always say, and like we talk about the profitable consultant, the person that identifies the true and real issue earns the right to fix it. So rock and roll.
No, you're right. I think, and then we coined that phrase, he or she who identifies the cause of the problem gets to fix it, because we just see it in action. 1,600 consultants, 52 countries, 10,000 plus organizations on the rosters of all the companies that have been helped by all these consultants around the world. That's what we see. When you walk in and say, as the physician, I know why your knee hurts. See the MRI I ordered? Well, see that thing right there? Yeah, that's not good. That's going to make it hurt. Everybody goes, well, then how do I fix that, doctor? And she's going to tell you what she recommends, surgery or therapy or whatever. When you use a diagnostic tool like what we're talking about today, and there's dozens of them out there, a whole bunch of them, whatever you're using, use something that's quantifiable, because like I'm showing on the screen here, when you walk in and say, see this score right here? Well, that's probably what's behind, my confident opinion professionally is that's what's behind this person not meeting their deadlines. The person constantly wanting to take 2 more days to review it a 3rd time. The person who needs to have 10 questions answered, even though the organization only has 7 answered. And they're not willing to squeeze the trigger and go, when I point to something and say, here's what I see, I've made the subjective objective. We talk about making the intangible tangible. Here it's tangible. There's a 99 score here. I'm using the disc. I look at these scores. Or, this individual slightly introverted, I can point to this like we talked about last week and say, this is not the person who's going to just jump up to volunteer to be the outgoing extrovert who wants to speak in front of the room. This is not the individual who should be on stage presenting all the time. This is going to make them uncomfortable. They've told you that. This is why they've told you that. It's not because they're lazy and they don't want to commit. This is very difficult for them to do naturally. When you do that, the company immediately says, what do we do about it? Even if they're not your client. And most of this happens in the sales process. Most of this is in a setting before I've gotten the contract with them. We teach a diagnostic sales process wherein I'm having these discussions like the physician before you become my patient. And it makes it so easy for you to make this sale because you've had this discussion. They see you as an expert and you were the one who said, here's the cause of that problem that no one's ever been able to figure out. So we talked about disc and how last week. Today we're talking about why, and how is, how the tasks, how you go about doing things. This is why. This is why you get out of bed in the morning. This is the values index. There's a whole bunch of pages to this report, but these are the 7 dimensions, and we'll kind of briefly walk through them real quick. Brian, you can, or I can.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing here is, right now, if you're a consultant and you're out there working with and trying to bring on new clients and you're interviewing and having those discussions, unless you're purely a sales trainer or that's your specialty, you're going to be pushed into the arena of dealing with human resource professionals. Okay. And a lot of folks get a little bit uncomfortable in some respects just because, it starts to get very detailed and very structured. And there's a lot of, and we have all the reliability studies, and you've got to have that. You've got to have that briefcase that shows that the instruments you're using are validated and reliable. And you better be very familiar with that vocabulary. But one of the most common phrases used right now among human resource professionals, and you're starting to see new titles. Like Jay, you were the first one that coined this back in like the late 90s. You said, there's chief information officers, there's chief executive officers, there's chief information officers. Chief technology officers came in the 90s. And you said this, you said, the most important asset, and you wrote this in the book, What's Your Genius? You said is the people. So who is the chief people officer? And you know what? You're like a prophet in a lot of respects, a fortune teller. If you, whatever you say, you predicted the future. We're today seeing that title of chief people officer, which means our human resource professionals are being given a seat at the table with the chiefs. And so they're bringing this discussion at that highest level in the organization. And so, I just want to put that the CPO is something that's real. And you to be able to play at that level as a consultant, you better be able to understand the vocabulary and what's going on, which brings us to this place here right now, which is engagement. Engagement in the workplace today is the hottest topic. And if you have curriculum, if you have information that gets around, either you have a track record in that, or you've got the ability to show that you can help an organization with regards to engagement. What is engagement? Let's define that. And then I'll throw it back to you, Jay, and how and what this instrument here that we're looking at and how it kind of defines that. But engagement is not necessarily how do we compel people to do a good job? How do we force them? How do we teach them to do a good job? How do we train them to do a good job? What they're talking about in engagement is, what is it about their job, their role, that causes them to run towards it, to feel the release of actually being able to do that job, do that task, do that role. And so when we talk about engagement, there's training on organizational engagement. What we look at here and what this really is in terms of our how, why, what, this middle instrument here, this diagnostic instrument, this talks about the personal engagement map of the individual you're working with. And so that's a question. Yeah.
What excites them?
Yeah.
I can, and to support your statement there, and we're not only working with HR professionals. A lot of the time we're working with sales managers, we're working with presidents of smaller organizations, general managers. They're all seeing the symptoms. And it's whoever is primarily concerned about the symptoms that you're working with. And many times that's more than a lower level HR person. It's a senior HR person in a large organization. It may be an executive vice president. It may be a CEO, even in a large organization. You know, Jack Welch was famous for saying his most important job was making sure they hired the right people. And he was personally involved in like the top 600 hires or something. To some degree, he had an eyeball in making those hires, because he truly did typify the idea of being a chief people officer, chief talent officer. The values instrument, when I wrote this, it was based on Edward Spronger's original scientific research, and then Alport, Vernon Lindsay, and another guy named Rokeach. And they had 6 in the beginning. They split it up. We won't get too deep into it, but it looks at what motivates you, what gets you out of bed in the morning. And they've done 70 something years worth of research collectively across all these different PhD groups. And you're either motivated by a high aesthetic drive, which is really balance and harmony, symmetry. You want pretty things, but a lot of the times it's emotionally pleasing things. It's symmetrical things.
Connectivity, for sure.
They're big on green initiatives and work-life balance and harmonious workplaces instead of contentious coffee is for closer workplaces. The economic, however, is quite different than that, and it's more the Gary Glenn Ross coffees for closers. It's a meritocracy motivation. It's an ROI motivation. It's I get up in the morning to see how I turn 2 into 4 and 4 into 8 and 8 into 16. How do I make more out of the resources I have? Very utilitarian. Doesn't care whether it looks good. It's all function over form. The individualistic drive, and as you notice, this is one individual's report. We all have some degree of motivation in one of these areas. This is about personality or personal freedom, autonomy. Political is about the ability to lead and be in charge. So they're driven to want to take control. They'll be the first to step up. Altruistic.
One thing I say too, Jay, isn't that just real quick? The economic is I win, and the political is we win. So there's a cool, simple way to kind of put that in there.
Yeah, they don't mind being behind us, as leading from behind. Altruist, about support, aid, benefiting others. Regulatory, the quality assurance folks, the law keepers, the ones who say there's a way to do this and I'm going to protect it. Let's go out and create processes and make sure that they're followed. That's motivating me. And the theoretical just wants to learn for knowledge sake. May not be able to apply, string theory to what they're doing, or quantum entanglement has nothing to do with the sales job they have, but they don't know about it and they're interested in reading about it, even though it means no benefit, like from a pragmatic standpoint, like the economic would want. So back to our examples in the minutes that we have left, of which there's 6. How do we see this in diagnostic terms? What is it that, I'll give you real quick. What is it that we've seen a problem at work? Because this is what this all comes down to. So we can give you other education on these profiles in depth in other places. But our purpose here is to say, if you're seeing problems and seeing symptoms in the organization, how does this help diagnose the cause of those symptoms? What were you going to say, Brian?
No, I think, and one thing too is we look at is there's 7, and we look at, a lot of times we look at the high ones. We also look at the low ones, and you can look at every single one of those and all of the definitions you just provided. If they're on the lower end, we just use the word if. So there are folks that may have low economic, and they may say, I'm competitive if, or in these unique situations versus all the time. So, that's something that when people bring us in, they go, what is it about this person? Maybe they've got a low theoretical, and the role that they have requires them not only to be adept to what they're currently dealing with, but also continuously learning about things that are coming. Well, this person might have a tendency to be behind the curve, and they're not the ones that maybe they kind of like OTJ, learn on the job. And so our consultants tell us they love having this personal engagement map because it helps them to ask questions that says, well, tell me about what is the job reward, right? Why do they do the job? Not because they're compelled to. How does the job feed them? And then you literally can have the feeding map of what the job feeds, and then you can look at their map, and it is so amazing to see that senior vice president or that president or the maybe whoever it is, and she'll look at that and she'll go, oh my gosh. And I literally have a quick story. We had a president. She was in charge of a huge, manufacturing and industrial organization. Her next in line, she had delegated to him the standard of understanding that maybe make sure all of their equipment, the facility and the grounds were in perfect tip-top shape. And the only thing she ever just really reprimanded this guy about is he didn't really, hold the people accountable to making sure all the semis and trucks and the grounds were tip-top. Well, her aesthetic was incredibly high. His aesthetic was incredibly low. We walked her through as the president of this incredibly large organization, and she looked at it and she goes, I've put David in the wrong, I've given him the wrong task. This actually is demotivating him. So I'll throw it back to you, Jay, but I mean, it's so cool to watch that little light bulb go off when somebody goes, that's why they do it sometimes, but they don't always do it.
Well, engagement has been a big issue. The Gallup polls, Harris polls, they all show statistically that engagement levels in a lot of organizations are critically low. 13% are actively disengaged, as much as 60% are moderately engaged, so they're barely excited about their work. In higher levels, they have syndromes. The symptoms that we see are people that say these types of things. Management that says they do what's asked of them, but nothing more. It's one of the most common complaints. High turnover. We got voluntary turnover where people aren't being fired. They're quitting. They just leave. They were here long enough until they found something else that they liked better. When we look at the top 3, primarily from an engagement motivation, because if we can get those that are exceeding the box, and so the box here is the norm, this midline here is the norm, and it's 1 standard deviation above and 1 standard deviation below. So the vast majority of people fall into this range here. If you exceed that, and it's the top 3 that exceed it the most, that we're of most interest in, these are the things that I want to connect with. And many times without seeing this, without having that subjective become an objective thing, without tangibly seeing these intangible drivers, we wouldn't know. It's very difficult to ask the questions. So I'm able to say, look, what's the job rewarding? So let's say we have a really high theoretical, right? We don't know that. Maybe they said something in their resume or something in the interview a year ago about they love to learn. Well, everybody says that in interviews because they think it sounds good. I don't know if it's real or not, or maybe they do, but it's just something they read or said. If you have a 93 theoretical and you put that person into a role where 6 months in, you say to them, you've learned everything that you need to. Now go repeat. You've done the training. You're good. You're stable. Your knowledge level, you've reached the top of the curve. So you're good. That's fantastic. You did great. You went through the learning faster than everybody else. You're awesome. If you don't continually give them the opportunity to learn something, they're going to go somewhere else to get it. Maybe that's reading a book at lunch. Maybe that's some other job. Maybe it's some other interest. But they have to keep feeding that desire to constantly learn. And if you're not giving it to them, then that's 2 of the 3 that may be connected. We see people that none of the 3 are connected, and they're strictly as a function of get the paycheck and get out. One of the top 3 might be committed. They're, let's say that they're this individual. They're an aesthetic, economic, theoretical. So they get to learn constantly on the job. There's always changes to the new tax code or the new technology, or they're the ones who have to go every quarter to a new program to learn the new model. They get they get good aesthetic satisfaction because it's a nice, peaceful environment. It's a beautiful surrounding, and they're not in a basement with no windows. Everybody there works cordially together. But their third place is they like a meritocracy. The more they do, the more they want to get. And you say to them, it's a $33,000 a year job. Next year, you're likely to get a 1.3% raise, which is going to be below cost of living because that's all we have to divvy up among the 30 of you on the team. Not going to make any more. There's a peanut butter of the month club bonus at the end of the year for Christmas. That person's going to have 2 of their 3 motivators driven, but not having a chance for some variable compensation or reward structure isn't going to interest them that much. And it's going to cause them to be less than optimally engaged. If you have somebody who's a high political,
all right, man.
That one came up fast. 20. All right, 20 minutes. Great on learning, high theoreticals or not, time to go sell some shit.
Hey, click it, like it, get out there, subscribe. We got a whole bunch more coming. 20 to profitability.